It is time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories making the morning's newspapers. And delighted to say that joining us tonight are the Sun's football editor, Charlie Wyett, and the Telegraph's chief sports reporter, Jeremy Wilson. Good to see you both. You're both very welcome. Let's start with a quick run-through of the back pages, shall we? And this is The Guardian, first of all. And their back page is dominated by transfer news. Manchester City plot Palace raid. Guardiola targets Eze with De Bruyne's future uncertain. There's a story on Aston Villa making a bold move potentially for João Felix. And also some Olympic and cricket stories on the back page too. Into the Eye. Anthony Gordon's future was a big hot topic at the Euros. His head wasn't turned by the link with Liverpool, apparently. And with the Olympics 3 days away, almost ready, Paris athletes apply the finishing touches. Into the Mail. Manchester United is the big story. And these are the quotes from the new sporting director, Dan Ashworth, who've been featuring here on Sky Sports News. Will take United back to the top, he says. And there's also a story from England's record appearance maker in the rugby world, Ben Youngs, revealing he's had heart surgery. Now that same story and an interview was covered in The Times. Tom Daley returning to Olympic action and will be carrying the flag in the opening ceremony. There's a story about Joey Barton being charged for tweets that he sent, and also a story on Team GB needing extra security. Into the Star. Gov, lift us up where we belong. More on Manchester United. We'll give the tools to rock the world once more, says Ashworth. And also Aston Villa completing a deal for Amadou Onana for 50 million. Into the Express. No rest until we are back on top again. Dan Ashworth's interview is the main story there. And in the Mirror, that story regarding Pep and the link to Eberechi Eze is also covered. City wants £68 million Palace star, and Ashworth is ready to take on the world. OK, so lots to get stuck into with Charlie and Jeremy. Let's do just that, and we'll begin with The Sun. This is your paper, Charlie, so I'll kick off with you if I could, and it's all to do with the England search for a new manager. How Toon boost is the headline. Power play to keep England target Eddie. The Sun saying Newcastle have held crunch talks with Eddie Howe, and he has now been given assurances that his power will not be reduced following new appointments in the club's hierarchy. Charlie, where does this leave the FA's search for a new manager then?
Well, I think the FA always knew that if they were going to get Eddie Howe, and there's clearly an interest in him, it wasn't going to be easy. And I think equally this story tonight, I think Newcastle fans will be happy that it looks as though Eddie Howe, he has spoken to the club. He's voiced his concerns. Just to rewind, of course, Dan Ashworth joined Manchester United. Paul Mitchell is now the sporting director at Newcastle. James Bunce is performance director. Amanda Staveley, an ally of Eddie Howe, really has also left. So last week, when he voiced his concerns that he needed to be backed, basically, even though Dan Ashworth did a terrific job at Newcastle, Eddie Howe always had the final say on all the transfers, and I think we'd all agree that Newcastle's record, in the transfer market was pretty good. So there was a concern, or is a concern, that maybe he will not have that power. So I think, Eddie Howe decided to come public on it last week in Germany, but he's now spoken to those people concerned and they've reassured him. Now, equally, Howe will want to see how that works out. It doesn't mean to say that England are going to drop their interest. The other key thing we've got to remember is that Newcastle are going to want compensation, and the FA don't exactly have millions in the banks to suddenly spend on a huge sum for compensation as well as wages. It's a job, of course, that Eddie Howe would be interested in. Why wouldn't he be? Equally, he is 46. I think the England job will come up again. So and he absolutely loves Newcastle. I think he's made that clear. So I think he will look and hope that the situation settles down. He is back to Newcastle and they can continue, the good work. Obviously, last year was a difficult year for our Newcastle, but there were some factors that didn't help them, of course, particularly injuries and not being able to, bring in as many players in the transfer market because they signed so many players previously. But I think Howe will be relieved that it looks as though the situation is a bit clearer at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, Jeremy, clearly, as Charlie has outlined there are easier targets for the FA. Do you think they will be put off by a story like this and will now be focusing their attention elsewhere?
No, you would hope not. I think if Eddie Howe is the person they think is right or among those that they want to speak to, they should definitely still pursue that and not act like just because he's spoken to Newcastle and this sort of message has come out that all is lost. I sense that England or FA want to do a very thorough process and we'll probably talk to several candidates about it. But I absolutely hope that they would still speak to Howe. I mean, I think they've got a great job potentially to offer an English manager with the young players that we've got, this sort of consistency we've had in major competitions. Okay, they're definitely not going to be paying as well as some club sides can, but for an English manager, you would still hope that would have an unbelievable pull for them. And I can imagine, I mean, Eddie Howe's such a thoughtful character. I can imagine he's in sort of some degree of agony about it all, particularly if there have been indirect conversations with the FA, given the uncertainties there are or the changes there's been at Newcastle, and then this going on as well. So absolutely, I think the FA shouldn't let this deter them. Equally, as Charlie touched upon, you do wonder if the reality of the financial choices could come into it when in the end, and obviously people like Graham Potter, Lee Carsley will be much cheaper options for them, unless they go for a big manager, you know, a Jurgen Klopp or someone like that who's out of work, and they hope that the pull of the job can attract them. But it's really important that they go through all the options thoroughly. And for me, Eddie Howe is he ticks most boxes. I feel like he's the best overall candidate at the start of the process. Obviously, loads of different factors will come into it by the end of the process, but they absolutely should still explore that. And you would hope that just as he's spoken to the Newcastle owners, he will do the same with the FA and really give it full consideration.
So we wait to see whether Eddie Howe does indeed remain at Newcastle, and will Anthony Gordon stay at St James's Park as well? If we move into the eye, there was this transfer talk during the Euros, wasn't there, that Liverpool were keen on Anthony Gordon. Eddie Howe saying here that Gordon's head was not turned by the Liverpool link. There was speculation that it did affect him at the Euros. Charlie, in this comment here from Howe, he says, I would welcome him back with 3 arms if I had them. How important has Gordon come to Newcastle? But do you think they could be tempted if the money was right?
It'd be a disaster for Eddie Howe, wouldn't it? Bearing in mind what we've just spoken about and wanting assurances that his power is not going to be reduced. And then the next thing they do, they sell one of their best players. It'd be a disaster for Newcastle fans and the team. And you know, Anthony Gordon has been a terrific signing. He's really developed as a player. Obviously didn't get much game time with England at the Euros, which was, I think, not only frustrating for him, but a lot of football fans as well. But he's a key part of that Newcastle team. He's an exciting player. He's getting better. And if Newcastle want to get back to where they were the previous season, that's top 4 Champions League football, they need Anthony Gordon in that team, and tearing it up front for Eddie Howe.
Let's stay on the theme of transfers and move to The Guardian and pick up this story, which we've already shown you is featured on a couple of the back pages, regarding Manchester City and an apparent interest in Eberechi Eze, with Kevin De Bruyne's future uncertain at the club. Jeremy, we'll come to the De Bruyne factor in a moment, but let's just focus on this apparent interest in Eberechi Eze at Palace. They were interested in him last summer, apparently, but went for Mateus Nunes at Wolves instead. And, he didn't get much of a look in, did he? Nor did Calvin Phillips before him. I mean, when all conquering City come calling, of course players want to join them. But is there maybe a cautionary tale for Eze there?
Absolutely. There's plenty of cautionary tales through the years with Manchester City, because obviously they do have the resources to make mistakes in the transfer market and go again with the next window. And that's been their big, apart from the fantastic coaching of Pep Guardiola, that's been their big advantage in the last 10, 15 years, that they can get more decisions wrong. And that has a knock-on consequence for the player. Equally, I think he's going to want to go if the opportunity comes up, because you have to back yourself in the end, and the opportunity to be coached by the best coach in the world, join the best team in the world, you're not going to pass that up or not want to do that, because you're not going to have the mindset that you might not get in the team, or you might not get enough games. So I'm sure he'd be keen on the move, and he should back himself to go for it, basically. But it is a risk. It's a risk for anyone going to a club like that, and especially if he gets perceived as Kevin De Bruyne's replacement, because he's pretty much irreplaceable. I think in sort of one of those players in the history of a club that you're never gonna be able to directly replace.
Yeah, and the De Bruyne side of things is in both of these stories the fact that he has 1 year left on his contract, and as we've seen in The Guardian, that he's wanted by the Saudi Arabian side Al Ittihad. Irreplaceable, as Jeremy says, in many ways, Charlie. But I mean, a year or two ago, you'd have thought that they'd have been moving heaven and earth to tie him down to a new deal. But obviously he had the injury last season, made just 18 appearances in the Premier League. Looking ahead, is he as indispensable as he maybe once was?
I think City will be, understandably, will be looking forward just in case he wants that move. I think he deserves the respect from City to make that decision. As he said, there's the sums of money we're talking about are mind-boggling, aren't they? So I can see why City are maybe looking at Eze. Equally, let's not forget, Jack Grealish might be another player that his future could be uncertain. He didn't play for City, barely in the last 5 games. So you never know what City have got planned. And equally, with that transfer, Eze, let's not forget, Palace are in quite a strong position because they've sold Elise to Bayern Munich already for 50 million. And that's why now they're suddenly saying they want 70 million for Mark Gahey. And with this Eze one as well, Palace they're not desperate for the money. So City would really have to pay a lot of money to get him. So I think it's an intriguing story. And I think it's got legs, this one. I think it could run for the next few weeks.
And just finally on De Bruyne and Manchester City, Jeremy, Guardiola's contract, like De Bruyne, is heading into its final year. Do you now get that feeling, that sense that maybe we are coming to the end of what has been a glorious era at the Etihad?
I'm not sure. Obviously, a lot will depend upon what happens with the Premier League charges and the whole outcome of all that stuff that's going on off the pitch. I think that will ultimately probably decide a lot more for the future of Manchester City in the sort of short term. I think out of the two, as fantastic as De Bruyne is, I think the one thing Guardiola's shown, and the one thing the sort of sporting director team behind him, the recruitment team, have shown, is they are fantastic at that continually evolving the team while not noticeably weakening the team. I mean, it's obviously easier to do if you've got plenty of resources, but they obviously have been really skillful at that to be consistently like 90 to 100 points, whatever, 85 to 95 points every year, whilst the natural evolution of a team is some going even when you've got deep pockets. But I think it's the stuff off the pitch that perhaps might decide whether this sort of era of Manchester City dominance carries on as much as anything. Although Guardiola as well, personally, I think is key. I think they'd manage without a player much more easily, even as great as De Bruyne has been for them.
To a club with big ambitions this summer, and that is Aston Villa. An 8th new signing through the door in the form of Amadou Onana, and that £15 million move from Everton. Charlie, on Villa, are they in many ways, comparable to Newcastle last season, who got into the Champions League? And then we saw, obviously, they had that brilliant win against PSG, but finished bottom of the group, struggled a bit to replicate their form in the Premier League. When you look at Villa now doing lots of business, doing it early as well, how well prepared do you think they are for the demands of Premier League and European football?
I think Villa are incredibly well prepared. I really like the look of this for the squad. I like the look of the signings. Obviously, they've got a brilliant manager who, when there was speculation over Ten Hag's future at United, the one name that wasn't really linked was Unai Emery, and he should have been, to be perfectly honest, because he's a terrific coach, and I think Aston Villa will be even better than last year. I think that. they could get in the top four again. I really believe that. And I just like the look of the signings. Yeah. And maybe a couple more to come. And there's some, younger lads, particularly I like Samuel Ealing Jr. that they've got from Juventus. So they might not be, sort of headline signings, but there's a really good balance, a good mix in what they're bringing in. And that's why undoubtedly Aston Villa fans have got every reason to really be looking forward to this season. Not just in the Champions League, where I actually think they'll do all right as well, but in the league.
Welcome back. You're watching Back Pages tonight. We've already brought you all the news on England transfers as well. Let's focus on the Olympics now, which are just a matter of days away, and we can show you the back page of the Guardian. One of GB's medal hopes, Katarina Johnson-Thompson, is pictured there. I couldn't quite work out how they were linking her to Zinedine Zidane, as they have. It's to do with the dressing room at the Stade de France, apparently. But it takes us to the Olympics, which is where we find Jeremy Wilson, actually, because he is in Paris, I believe, coming to us live, Jeremy, from the media centre out there. We've had such a busy summer of sport with the Euros and Wimbledon and everything, the golf and everything else, that in some ways the Olympics have snuck up on us here in this country. What about out there in Paris? What's the mood like?
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. I mean, they've obviously had the French election as well, so French general election. So I think it snuck up on them a tiny bit in terms of the public. Obviously, they've been planning for it for years and years, and yeah, very much. There's an Olympics on. A lot of the venues are in the iconic streets and places in Paris. So as you go down the centre of Paris, there's you can literally see where things are going to be happening. There's stuff at the Eiffel Tower, all along the Place de la Concorde and Arc de Triomphe. So, yeah, and they're locking down the bit along the River Seine for the 6-kilometre opening ceremony. Huge security operation, 40,000 police, big presence in Paris, but a really great atmosphere as far as we can experience at the moment. But yeah, as you say, I'm in the press centre. It's hence the unusual backdrop. But it's the sort of calm before it all starts. And as you say, I think, probably more than any Olympics, it's obviously England don't get to the final of a football tournament usually before an Olympics, usually ever, and then sort of add in Wimbledon Open, and I think just the next few days people will sort of start to plug into this, and it should be a fantastic few weeks.
I just think back to the Champions League final, which took place in Paris a couple of years ago, and the debacle, really, the scenes outside the stadium there. Is Paris under any extra scrutiny and pressure to make sure these games go well and we see no repeat of scenes like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been one of the talking points, something they're very aware of. The athletics will be held at the Stade de France, so the same stadium that had all those issues. The kind of line from the Paris organisers is that it was almost a blessing that issues happened that made them look at everything, reevaluate everything, try and learn from the mistakes. And they're very much saying we've got a completely different security arrangements. There's this sort of outer ring and then an inner ring, as they're obviously a circle where people can get into where ticket holders can get through. So unless you've got a ticket, you're quite a long way away from a stadium. So that the word is that they're very confident and that they've learned from those mistakes. But obviously the proof will be in how things go. I mean, the build up to an Olympics is always dominated by stories of readiness, security. Here it's been the kind of state of the River Seine, where there's swimming triathlon going on because of the pollution. All these issues. Generally, with an Olympics, once the sport starts, a lot of that gets forgotten. Hopefully that will be the case, but we know that we live in a pretty unpredictable world, so they're certainly on alert on multiple fronts.
And Charlie, in terms of Team GB's chances, how optimistic are you? Or any particular athletes or sports people you're looking out for to bring home the gold?
Yeah, it's good. As ever, I think there'll be a few surprises. Our back page, the paper tomorrow, is focused on the fact that Team GB are sending out 47,500 tea bags and I think 200 boxes of cornflakes. So that's what we've done for tomorrow's paper.
You've got to have all the home comforts, haven't you? Absolutely. Let's just finish off on a football story, and it's actually an interview we've been carrying here on Sky Sports News regarding Dan Ashworth, the new sporting director at Manchester United, who's been speaking about his hopes for the new season. Gov, lift us up where we belong is the take on it in the Star. And this is the talk from Dan Ashworth about bringing the glory days back to Manchester United. Charlie, I'll come back to you. He says it won't happen overnight. This is the sort of message we're getting. We've heard all this before, haven't we?
We have, but I think while it won't happen overnight, it will happen at Manchester United now. You know, for years they have not behaved like one of the biggest clubs in the world. Their transfer plans have been, well, there hasn't been one really, has there? Now, with Dan Ashworth, they've got someone who I think will oversee a crucial rebuild. Just look at his track record with the FA till 2018, the start of what Gareth Southgate created. At Brighton, look where they are now. Look where Newcastle are now. And I know they've had a lot of money, Newcastle, but they spent it properly. And as we all know, Manchester United have spent years of not spending money properly. The signings they've already made, the couple in the last couple of weeks, I think will make the team better. And I think United fans can now be guaranteed that they've got someone who's going to oversee a proper restructure on and off the pitch.